HolyWireMod here. This is tutorial 4D in the How to Build series, where we're going to be taking a look at EGP touchscreens. So let us start by getting EGP right here, and we'll get expression 2 screen, or chip right here, expression 2. So unlike the console screen, we are not going to be using a graphics tablet, which would get the user input, but instead we're going to be utilizing the already existing touchscreen features of the EGP screen. So let's create the wire link, and then we're going to create user of type entity. Alright, so let's wire this up. So user wire link to wire link. Now, notice when I get the debugger out and I press E on the screen, it gets my user data, which is very interesting. So we're going to be using that to make this touchscreen. So say if first or duped and cover if statements in tutorial 3 expression 2 series. We're going to be drawing these next couple objects from the top left, and that's very important. And to do that, we're going to use this command and set it to 1. Then we're going to be creating a for loop, which covered tutorial 8 expression 2 series, where I equals 1 starting position to a final value 3, increment it by 1 for each passing of the loop. And we're going to be drawing a box right here with index I of vec2, cover that in tutorial 4a expression 2 series. And the initial x position is going to be 50, the initial y position is going to be 50. Then we're going to tack on some more y values, so it's going to be 50 plus 50 plus 100 plus 150, and that's to space out the buttons. If you want there to be like a little gap between the buttons, you could put like 52 or something, or maybe 51. Up to you. So then let's set the size. Nextly, we're going to edit the color. So everything here should pretty much be review, with the exception of egpDrawTopLeft, of course. So we have 75 times I, and we're going to be making this a shade of gray right here. So we're going to have 3 different shades of gray. If you want 50 shades of gray, you can do that too. You can put 50 shades right there, bam. But you need to lower these values just a tad. But we're going to do 3 shades of gray for this tutorial. That's good enough. So anyway, for all future EGP objects, we're now going to draw them from the center again by doing this. Okay, so that's how you do that. So let's review some functions. So functions, so we're going to create a function called number called isPressed. And this is going to be like a conditional check. So we're going to have an input which is going to be a type number, right? So that's going to represent the index. So actually, if you really want to properly label this, call this index right here. And then let's say the hit position wherever you clicked on the screen with the E button be cursor and user. So this is going to get a vec2. And then we're going to return from this function a type number, a 0 being false and a 1 being true. And we're going to be using a new vec2 command called inrange. So this takes all vec2 inputs. It's going to check to see if the hit position is in between these 2 vec2 positions. So is it within a box or a square in some examples if all sides are equal. So let's go here and we'll have index. So whatever box we're checking for is going to be right here. And then we're going to have, that's the starting position. So remember, we drew from the top left-hand corner, which means we're checking from the top left-hand corner. And that's going to be point number 1. Now we're going to have EGP size as well for the index. But we're going to be adding that to the position. And when we do that, that's going to get the bottom right-hand corner, of the box. So this is pretty much saying in total is where you clicked in between the top left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner of these created EGP boxes. If it is, return a 1. If it doesn't, return a 0. All right? Simple enough. And then we're going to create another function which is going to output vector2. and we're going to call this one move object. And it's going to have this index right here also to reference the object that we're moving. So we're going to have x equals EGP, or it's assigned to, not equal, EGP position index. And we're going to get the x from that, and we're going to do the likewise with the y. And then we're going to say EGP box index. We're going to have a vec2 right here. And here's the formula for you. So we're going to have -1 times the absolute value of x divided by x times 50. So that 50 corresponding, of course, with this 50 right here. Okay, so then we're going to have y. So what this formula does, for those confused, is it will say that, oops, we have one more argument to do, but it will say that, okay, so we're going to have x divided by x. So if x is off the screen, because the screen goes from 0 to 512 pixels, if it's in a negative value, it'll say negative x, the absolute value of negative x, which is just x, divided by x, which is another negative value, is going to give us a -1. -1 times -1 is just 1, which is going to set the positioning of the box to 50, which is back on the screen. And if it were +1, so this would be +1, this would be 0, and this would set it to, I mean not 0, this would be -1, and this would be set to -50, which is off the screen. So it's, in a sense, toggling the box on and off the screen, which is a good way to create a page if you have a menu with many pages. So, but I recommend parenting objects to those pages when doing that. So anyway, here we go. We're going to set the size to 50/50 right here. And lastly, we need a return. And just for fun, we're going to return the EGP position. This is also partly for debugging as well, in case there's any issues that we need to look at. So now we have our function set up. Let's start with the code. So let's do a conditional check here. So if the first button is pressed, so if pressed object 1, so has the first EGP box returned a 1 from this. If it has and it is true, then then we're going to print move object 2. Alright, so this is going to print the position of object 2 because we're returning the position, and it's also going to move the object as well. So let's check that out. So we press that, and there's a little orientation issue right there. But for the most part, it seems to have worked, that it's going on and off the screen. So actually, I believe, there we go. If we just update the expression2 chip, now it's working properly. All right. So keep that in mind when if you're using this function, that you need to update the expression2 chip. All right. So let's go else if, and then we'll do the same thing for the other buttons. So what if button number 2 is pressed? What button number 3 is pressed? Then we'll say, let's do this one 3 and this one 1, so we can never lose track here. So here we go. So now I'm just pressing all these buttons and they're going everywhere and disappearing. But as you can see, this is now operating as a touch screen, which is really cool. And it's also outputting the vec2. So if you have any more questions on how touchscreens work, please let me know in the comments below. Until then, I will see you guys in the next tutorial.